This is not your average Seiko Mod because this watch is actually powered by a Miyota movement. It features parts made by Namokimods, and they recently released a range of Miyota parts or Miyota compatible cases, movements and so on that allow us to actually have a go at making watches with a higher end movement than the typical Seiko NH family. So I decided to put this design together using parts only from Namokimods, so you guys can follow along and build your own too if you wanted. The key benefits is the really thin case profile. This is only 11.5 millimeters thick compared to your average Seiko Mod, which would be probably over 14 millimeters thick. We also have a super smooth sweep of the seconds hand because this 9 series Miyota movement is running at 28,000 vibrations per hour, which is a higher beat rate than your typical Seiko movements. And the overall watch honestly feels like one of the best I've ever made. So thanks to Namoki for supplying me with the parts. If you're interested in what I'm doing, by the way, please check out my website. That's svkwatches.ae. I'm based in Dubai. I make custom watches for clients all over the world. And you can also follow my new Instagram account. That's svkwatches.ae as well. Keep watching for the full tutorial on how I built this watch. Alright guys, so let's have a look at this Miyota 9055 automatic movement. Already it looks much nicer than the Seiko, and you can see that large rotor which spins incredibly freely as well. So you're going to see this rotor spinning much more often than you might an NH-36. Let's just have a look at a similar NH movement, so the same kind of specs. This one already has the spacer on it, but you can see it is genuinely a little bit thicker, and this also has the day and date discs on it as well. But we should be able to get a notably thinner watch using the Miyota, and it's going to beat at 28,000 vibrations per hour. So let's start putting this thing together. Now I was a little bit confused because initially you get these other sort of spacers and little screw and another little spacer, and of course the crown stem with the movement from Namoki. But with the case that I'll be using, which is this SKX style case, we'll come to that a bit later, you do get this custom spacer. Now as far as I can understand, and I'm no watchmaker of course, I am a modder, I do this for fun, not for a job, but do correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I am intending to simply use this custom spacer, drop the movement in it this way, and just press it all down around the edges, and then we'll be installing the dial on top of that with dial dots. So let me go ahead and just put the movement inside the spacer first. Okay, so you can see the movement is inside the spacer with the crown sticking out at 3 currently. Don't forget we are using an SKX style case, so we're going to have to set the dial to a 4 o'clock crown position, something like this. Interestingly, the movement holder I have, the 3D printed one that I've always used, this actually fits the movement spacer quite well with the dial, the movement in it, and that, you know, fills you with a little bit more confidence regarding using this otherwise slightly more loose design compared to the NH-36 I'm used to. So I believe any kind of movement holder designed for NH movements should fit this combination. So the next thing we're going to do is attach the dial. So I've gone for Namoki's, and I've actually had this out already. This is Namoki's new California dial, and I really like this dial. So let me just pop it out gently. It has a really nice sort of matte black finish. You can see that I've got some pretty strong lights here. We can't see any reflections off those. I like the fact that the markers are kind of framed and a little bit reflective, and I just like the California design. I think it looks really classy. Even their logo just seems to make sense on it. So we're going to be placing this basically on the top. However, because it's a little bit challenging to figure out the crown, we are going to have to try and position the movement in this holder exactly as it would be in this case. So what I'll be doing is simply holding it down from the top, picking a reference point and attaching the movement. Now you might be wondering, how is he going to attach the movement? How is he going to attach the dial to the movement? Well, I'm actually going to use dial dots. These little sticky back rectangles we can get from Namoki as well. I think they've recently started stocking them. These are super useful for attaching dials to movements and so on. What I'll probably do is pick a couple places on here. You could literally use anything. This golden sort of plate in the middle, as nice as it looks, it is going to be covered by the dial, so I will probably put a couple on there and see if I can reach the edges on the black as well. So here we have the dial stuck down onto the movement. It does seem to sit a little bit proud of the spacer, but it is attached to the top of the movement, and you do have to be quite gentle when you're manipulating it and moving it around. Now I believe I've got it in a pretty good position. We'll find out in a minute once we put it in the case. Now in order to put it in a case, you've got to remove the crown. So in order to do that on this Miyota movement, you have, just get the rotor a bit out of the way, this little indent where just next to my finger there, we're going to push on that whilst pulling the crown out. Typically I like to use a spare crown stem. If I find one, here we go, like this, and I would just put it inside here and then hold the movement while pressing it, and I should be able to release the crown like that. So you can do that in a movement holder, of course. I'm quite used to doing it because I'm often flipping movements over to remove the crowns. Now what I'll do next is do a bit of a test fit. So if I take my cushion here, and then we take the movement with no case back and no crown in it, and we are simply going to place it over the top. That looks pretty good. I'm quite happy actually with the position of the crown and the 12 and all of that. So we're going to proceed to actually fit the hands. To fit the hands, we will need to put the crown back in. So, and you can see that it is starting to come a bit loose on the sides here. So I will need to just check to keep that flat. I'm going to pop the crown back in. We're going to pull it to stop the movement. And then I'm going to try and seat it back into my movement holder. It is a bit of a tight fit actually with this this dial and everything on it, but it does fit quite securely, so it's not going to move around. Now the hands, I've got some Marine Master style hands. These are also from Namokimods. I'll get them out and I'll show you me putting them on. So I wanted this watch to be mostly sort of Seiko inspired with a few little differences like this dial. So we've gone for some Marine Master style hands. Namoki actually supplies hands in these little cases which are quite secure and actually quite easy to pick up as well, straight from the cushion, or usually it is, there we go. With a bit of Rodico. So it doesn't, because this is a no date movement, it doesn't actually matter where we start placing the hands. So the obvious one to start with is the hour hand. So I'm just going to drop it straight on. I believe the sizes and all are mostly the same as it would be for Seiko. Naturally I want to put it to 12, but it doesn't actually matter where you put the hour hand first. Now for this I'm actually going to remove this casing cushion and set my table up a bit higher so that I can see more clearly what I'm doing. I will attempt to use Namoki's hand setting tool. I've actually bought this one recently. This is designed, the blue end is for GMT hands, but I found that the black end works great for hour and minute. So this is like a all-in-one kind of tool that I've started using quite a lot. So all I'm going to do is push down on the middle. Apologies if this doesn't show up very well as I'm doing it, but I'll show you the outcome. We're going to go down and press the hand down. Okay, there was quite a big click there, which I'm not so used to, but it looks like it's seated fairly well. I may just need to get under it a little bit and check on the front it's not going down too far. Usually what I do, they don't usually click on like that, so perhaps that's a Miyota hand's quirk, but I usually sort of steer it back a little bit to try and level it and so on. This is very hard to focus on camera, but let me attach this hand and I'll show you how it should look. So I've just had a quick look around. It did actually go on really well the first time, so surprisingly easy. The key thing to check though is perhaps my mistake in ordering these quite large legible hands was that they will start to cover these indices, and because the indices are applied, you've got to be extra careful to see if they are going to cover, if they're going to go over them, which they do. Interestingly as well, as far as I think my muscle memory is telling me, the Miyota movement is actually kind of backwards, as in I'm having to turn the crown anti-clockwise to go clockwise on the dial, but that's, I believe, similar to the ETA line of movements as well. So now all I'm going to do, given this dial's layout, I'm just going to try and line up perfectly to 12 and then get the minutes hand on. The process would be exactly the same, so I just had to check that that was indeed straight. And this is my method for doing hands. People use various other tools and techniques. It is often a little more smooth when I'm not recording it because I'm trying to show you kind of all the steps. Now I will have to pause the video and zoom into this and line them up, but the idea is I'm just trying to lay the minute hand directly on top of the hour hand, so clearly it needs to advance a little bit, and then we're going to gently push here. It's quite important to not push too hard, especially with the minute hand, because if it clamps down too far it could start scratching the hour hand, and then you end up having to replace them. So let me do that carefully now, and then we can take a look. I've just set the minutes hand and it was surprisingly easy actually. I've had better luck setting these hands than I usually do with Seiko movements, so perhaps that's the tolerances in the hands and the actual movement itself. Namoki does have a range of Miyota hands, actually many similar hands to the Seiko designs that we're quite used to, but it was surprisingly straightforward and hardly any pressure is required to get it on in the right place. So you can kind of already start to feel like this is a higher end movement, hand, etc. combination. I still can't get over that dial, guys. You wouldn't believe the amount of reflections I usually get, and this black just eats it all up. It's amazing. So the second hand. Now, by the way, this green stuff is Rodico, in case you didn't know already, but if you followed me for a while, you know that this is the watchmaker's best friend. We use this for cleaning dials too. I spotted a little dirt on the dial a minute ago. The second hand, now I have a particular process for this. People have their own options, but I basically roll it into a little bit of a sausage. I stick it to the underside of the front of our second hand, and then I position it like so. And I literally stick the Rodico to the dial. It's very easy to remove from a dial. And then let's try and find an appropriate place. Let's just get into this a little bit. So the idea is once it's stuck down, you've got yourself a little cantilever kind of crane system going, and we're going to sort of manipulate the Rodico to try and get it into the right position. Once it's there, we're just going to use a flat-ended tool, such as this one. This is a Bergeon one. You can find, has it got the number? Yeah, 7404-3. You'll be able to find this type, similar tool though, from Namoki and so on. And then we're just going to press down onto the pin, and it should hopefully go in. And I'm expecting it to go in much easier than it usually does with an NH movement. So now I've just set the hand. It was actually a little harder to find the sort of sweet spot in the middle, but once I did, it did go in quite comfortably. I believe because perhaps I didn't roll my little Rodico high enough, It has the hand is curving down ever so slightly, and it's in danger of touching the minute's hand. So quick little tip, you can use a straw for this as well. I use a folded up bag, so usually have them lying around, and we're just going to cradle the second hand and just massage it up a little bit on this side. You really don't need to go very far, because this is just a simple piece of plastic that's doing this. You can kind of control where the bend goes, and you can gently bend it up so it becomes more flat, and of course doesn't get in the way of the minutes. So as we go around the dial, you should be able to look carefully, see it's not, well, it's hard to show you on this view, but it's not rubbing against the hands in any way. Now the next job is to clean up the dial and the hands. So for that I use a trusty blower, which does most of the job. If it's just perhaps pieces of lint or dust or something, and then Rodico. So where we've just added the hand, and let's see actually for the first time that 28,000 vibrations per hour, it does genuinely look smoother, and it just kind of, and to be honest, this dial, these hands, I'm really quite happy. This is probably going to be the most kind of proper watch I have made. Oh, look and see that my hand has indeed actually caught the minutes hand there. So I'll sort that out, just lifting the hand at the end a little bit more, or actually pressing the minute hand down. I'll clean up the rest of the dial and we'll come back for the crystal. So here we have the hands running beautifully around the dial now. I did just need to actually push the edge of the minute hand down slightly and raise the seconds a little bit more. You may find as well when you're cleaning the hands, if you're using the Rodico to sort of push on it and just get things off, it does actually bend the hands a little bit. But now as I'm testing it here, it should be running over the minutes hand with no problem. Once it does that consistently, it'll be fine. It's not going to dramatically bend back or anything unless it's loose in the middle, but I found this to be quite successful. So you can see now it's crossing over and keeping running it fine. The crown I've just removed from this, because the next thing we're going to do with this set is put it in the case. So I'm just going to use one of Namoki's little pots to cover it and put it out of the way. The case now, where is it? Here we go. The case itself is lovely looking. It's super slim, and that is the kind of point of this build. So the other parts I've decided to pick for it is actually a slim crystal, which is the NMK 309. This is actually a flat sapphire crystal. I wanted to go completely flat and as slim as possible on the top. Before I fit it, I'm actually going to install the slim case back onto the watch. Now I'm only going to install this to sort of help it align in my press, which I'll show you briefly in a minute. But then to prepare this for pressing, we're simply going to remove it. Comes in this protective sheet. Now sometimes it isn't so obvious which side is up and which side is down. There should be clear AR coating here, and I'm just looking at the beveled edges. It looks to be the same. So if you use some light, you might be able to spot a slightly bigger bevel edge on this side. So I'm going to actually use that and as the top part. So I'm going to assume this is the top. It doesn't matter too much if you find some issues after fitting. It's not too hard to replace it anyway. We are going to drop it in on the top. The gasket is actually already there. I should have said that. And we're just going to try and place it so that it matches, and there is this sort of single thin black line, apologies for the focus, all the way around. Now, fortunately, I have a really good press, and that press seems to take care of any issues when it comes to even slightly misaligned crystals. It will just do it. So let's head over there and I'll show you how. All right, guys, so I've got my Bergeon style press here. This one is actually from Aliexpress. It's not an actual Bergeon press, but it's the same sort of style with this pillar down the middle and a moving handle rather than like a lever rather than a screw. I found this really successful on pretty much any kind of crystal I encounter. I have just tried to have a go actually, and it seems that this case or this crystal is really quite a challenge to get the crystal in, even with a good press. I would highly recommend, if you're going to go for this sort of project, buy a bunch of crystal gaskets, because I've just had to go through one or two now to this point. I'm hoping that this time it is going to seat. It was just really hard to actually level the crystal inside. It seems that SKX gaskets seem to be the same fit, but let's see. Okay, a little bit more confident with this attempt, but it honestly appears to be quite a challenge. Now, I do sometimes like to, I'm worried that this side might be a bit off, so I'm just going to give it an extra press on there. But this looks like it has actually seated fairly well. I will have a proper look at it and maybe give it a few more presses, but it is quite hard to get the crystal seating nicely in this case. So I've had a quick look at the crystal and I am quite happy with how it's seated finally. It did take a few attempts, but we've got an even sort of protrusion all the way around. Now at this point I'm actually going to install the bezel as well, because I use the same press to install the bezels. We have a click spring that needs to go on, which is much the same as an SKX is. And then we also need the bezel itself. Now I've gone for a LX style bezel to keep in the Seiko theme. Hopefully you can see that fairly clearly. I'll show you a proper close-up of this in a minute. Namoki bezels do come with the gaskets already inside, and they are usually lubricated enough as it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and press this one on. These are slim bezels, by the way, I should have said, which means that they are actually a lot easier to install and remove, because there's just less metal to deal with. Now I'm hoping that this same die will just fit, and I think it will. So we can just use the press again. In fact, because I may want to use that case back, I will just put a bit of cloth in between to not to scratch it. Quite an assertive push down. And we do have a clicking bezel. It is quite tight, so I might actually remove it and either re-oil it or change the gasket, but that bezel went on really quite nice and tightly. I think it's going to be a nice solid watch. So this is now actually a week after I last recorded pressing the crystal and bezel. The reason for that is because I realized I actually had the wrong crystal and it was way too high in the case. What I should have got, because I was using a slim bezel in this case, was the new Namoki NMK314 crystal, so I'll link that one instead. This allows it to sit completely flat or just protrudes ever so slightly with the bezel insert in. So we're back where we were, but the process is the same. Notably, this crystal went in first time absolutely flat on my press. I have a feeling that because I was using quite a thick crystal in the last part of the video, I had that difficulty. Don't forget, Namoki also sell SKX size gaskets. I like these white color ones. Do recommend getting some of these if it's going to be your first time pressing a crystal. Now, the next job is simply to clean out all of the case and get the dial and movement in it. We also have the crown prepared. I will recap how to do that as well, but you need the movement back into the case in order to move on. So I'm just going to clean this. I typically use a microfiber cloth to check the crystal is all clear at the front. It's also good to get a nice bright light shining down on it this way and look carefully. It's very hard for me to do this with the camera in front of my face, but I will try to clean all this up. Another useful tool here is the dust blower, and actually this tool, which is again a Bergeon style tool, but this is a crystal or actual dial cleaner pen from Cousins UK. This is only quite a cheap tool, but it's got a little microfiber pad, and you can clean out every part of the crystal really well with this. So I'm going to go ahead and clean it, and then I'll show you how to drop it on. So I've got my case nice and clean. I've just put the dial and movement back onto this cushion. You can see it's not running now because it's been so long since I actually was back at this position. So we are just going to give it one final blow over and just lower the case straight down over the dial and movement, and hopefully it should press in quite nicely and firmly to the point where you can pick it up. Always be careful doing that. You don't want to drop the movement out of the case if it's a bit loose. Over on the other side, you can gently just press onto the central part of the movement, avoiding the hairspring here. That's the dangerous part. To be honest, all of it's quite delicate in the Miyota, so I wouldn't really recommend touching most of it, but the rotor, you can just give it a little push if needed, or on the kind of spacer around. Now I think I've got it all pretty much lined up as it is. I will just check the dial is centered. The printing on the dial can be a little bit off, so it looks like we've got a little bit of a gap on this side, but that can move around as we start pushing the crown in and closing it. Fitting the crown now, we've got a nice knurled screw down crown here from Namokimods. This is an SKX crown. It doesn't have to be specific to the new style case. So you could use any SKX crown. However, the stem that you will get with the movement is the one that you should use. I've actually already cut down the one with the movement, but this is an example Seiko NH-Series crown, which crown stem, which I'll just show you how to do it. It's fairly easy. Now with this one, I will measure this in a second and I'll drop it on the screen, the actual size you need. However, this one, the way I figure that out is essentially cutting it. So usually with a bit of experience, you already know roughly how much you need to start with, but I always cut it too long and then slowly cut it down, putting it in, taking it out of the watch. So the way I cut it nowadays is simply holding it into a pair of pliers like so, and then sort of bending it slightly while cutting it, and that should give you a fairly clean break. You can also file the end if it's a bit sharp on one side, and then screwing in the crown, you would use the back of a pair of tweezers like that, so it clamps in, there's a square part there, and then the crown should simply screw on. Now here you want to put a fair bit of pressure on it, but not so hard that it actually breaks the internal mechanism of the crown, because it does have a spring in there. But this is going to be too long because it's quite a lot longer than my example, but you get the idea hopefully. To take it off, same process, you just unwind it. Now some people say put some glue or whatever on here, or some Loctite. I have never done that and it's always been fine. Because once they are together, they should move as one anyway. There's no reason for the crown to come loose, and I've never had an issue with the crown for this reason. So I'll put the size of this crown on, and we'll get the crown installed right now. So the crown stem looks kind of similar. It's got a little bit of a more cylindrical shape halfway up. I've already prepared and cut and filed this one, so it should fit in fairly nicely. So to actually install it, we're going to place it through the gasket, and it should slide into the movement fairly easily. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a wobble as we go in, and this is how much play you should be able to have. So I quite like it when there is a fair bit of play. That means the crown pops out a little bit more, so it's easier to wind it, easier to set it. If you press it in, you should be able to lock onto the thread easily. There shouldn't be any sort of rough feeling movement or anything like that when you're screwing it down, and most importantly, the crown should completely go up to the case when it's screwed in. So next is the case back. We've got the standard solid case back and the gasket. To simplify things a little bit, I'm just going to pop it around this edge, because the last thing I want is the gasket to get pinched by this edge here. Now I do love seeing that rotor spin, so I probably won't actually keep this this case back and switch it for the slim Sapphire one I have, but we should be able to get this screw down fairly easily. So once you've got it on, you need to tighten it as much as you can by hand and then use a tool. I like to use this type of case back tool, but there are various types. As long as it's got the sort of two teeth on it, it should go in fairly easily. You may need to spin it around a couple of times for it to catch the right part, and then slowly rotate it. Try not to do that and jump out of the holes to tighten it down fully. There are much more expensive and fancy tools out there, but this one I have found quite good because it's a quick way for me to get a lot of pressure through those pins. So this is now assembled. Let's give it a bit more of a wind. I'm just going to pop the crown out and wind the movement because it's been dead for a week. And now we can finally sort of get a feel for how everything fits together, and now it's all screwed in. I am really quite happy with the fit and finish of everything here. So it feels good. The crown it's got enough movement in it to make it comfortable. It feels secure when it's screwed in. So the last point now is simply to attach the bezel insert. Now this is one of the easier parts of the whole process because you are simply going to stick this flat ceramic bezel insert. I've chosen deliberately a Seiko style one. I want to keep this, you know, looking like a Seiko derived sort of model, just significantly thinner than the average SKX. So I've got a bit of 3M tape here. I'm not sure which one it was that came with the set, but I'm just going to use this one. The first thing I always do is peel out the middle. This helps lift the actual edge of the tape, which is what we want, and we're going to place it around the inside of the bezel, basically where we are going to stick the insert. So it should be the right size. This is an SKX sized tape ring or bezel ring. I'm not really sure what they call them, but yeah, just a simple 3M double-sided tape, and you'll be surprised that, you know, even higher end luxury brands tape in their inserts. It's the easiest, most secure way to get it all nice and smooth and flat in there. So once that is installed, this might be actually a good opportunity to just drop your insert on the top and just have a look at how your crystal fits before you stick it on. But I am quite confident, so we are going to go ahead and stick it. So I'm going to take this out, and you can see I have my bezel ready to take the insert. I'm now just going to position the click so that I've got a nice defined click at 12, and then I'm going to drop the insert in, and hopefully it's actually going to match up with these little marks at the top as well, which I think it does, which is nice. So let's try and get that in to the appropriate place. If you don't get this right, you will be able to remove the whole bezel, remove the bezel insert, put the whole bezel back, and then restick it. So it is possible to fix it, but it is a bit of a pain to do. Now I am quite happy with how this looks already. Bear in mind, I don't always make watches looking through a camera, so it is so please be kind to me in the comments. But this is my first time working on a Miyota case and movement watch, and I am really happy with how this turned out. Let me go grab a SKX or similar case so we can see the true difference and the sizes. So here we go, guys. This is the final test. We have our Miyota powered SKX style watch here. Now let's see the true final thickness once everything is together, and it is bang on 11.5. So that is really impressive for the style of watch it is. It should still maintain the 200 water resistance, which is actually above this example. Now this is my SSK003 mod you might have seen in my last video. I've picked this one just because it's the closest thing to an SKX I have, and you can see that the overall case dimensions and positions of the crown and so on are all very similar, but the key difference is the thickness. So on the left hand watch, if we measure that as, and this actually has the standard Seiko parts, all but the bezel here, that is 14. So significant difference there of about, what is that, almost 20% thinner? Is that right? Yeah, something like 15-20% thinner for the Miyota powered watch. Now this, granted, is not the Sapphire case back, so I'm going to get that one on and compare again. So I've just been trying to get this case back on, and as cool as it looks, unfortunately it can't stay. The case backs like this that Namoki supplies are the same kind of profile as this example here. So they do have a long screw thread, whereas the actual one that came with the watch has a very short screw thread. You'll find this issue appear on the original SKX mods, where if you change the movement you also needed to change the case back or change the gasket inside, so, or the spacer inside. Basically what this means is we can't really use this one. I wouldn't believe it makes the watch overly thick. Right now it's clearly not screwed down fully, and it is still 2.67, it's 12.67, sorry. I imagine if it's screwed down fully it might be around 12, so it's only going to be about 0.5 millimeter of difference, and I will try my best to get the right case back because I love seeing that rotor spin. So for now we're going to have to keep it on the blank one, and we'll get the strap on and see what my final thoughts are on this. So here's the watch on the black rubber strap from Namoki. This has straight ends, it has quick release spring bars, and it is a really nice, tough, actually quite lengthy strap, which is great for me because I've got a larger wrist. But it feels like FKM rubber, really nice quality, and I think it'll definitely stand the test of time. I also think though that this watch would look equally good on a leather strap, a NATO, pretty much anything, because it is so versatile. Let's get it onto my 7 3/4 inch wrist and see how we go. So yes, straight away I can feel the benefit of the longer size strap. Namoki's got a sort of quite a unique buckle system where the buckle is a bit of an S shape. I'm not totally sure why they do that, but I think it might help strengthen the fit on there, and not to stretch the strap out too much. But there you go, guys. Now immediately this does not feel like an SKX. It does wear like one, but pretty much everything about this watch feels a higher quality, and much of that is thanks to that smooth second sweep and that thinner case profile that you don't immediately notice it, but it just feels more comfortable because the watch is less top heavy. It's slender. I think on a leather strap this is starting to give me remind me of a Sin sort of style watch, you know, super utilitarian, very high quality, accurate, and well made. Now, do I think the Miyota is something I'm going to do many orders for? Probably not, because of the lack of parts variety. Right now you can only really do it on a few dials and cases from Namoki. I'm sure there may be other places you can get Miyota parts, but they're fewer and further between when compared to Seiko Mod parts. But I can see straight away why microbands and smaller watch manufacturers use Miyota movements, because they are that much thinner, that much more special, and that much just nicer to use. And trust me, if you do go as far as making one of these yourself, you will be very proud of yourself, and I am equally proud of myself for building this watch. This is probably the nicest spec watch I have ever built, and it's thanks to that movement. So thank you to Namokimods. Please check out their parts, and keep watching, guys, because I hope I will come back at you with an update, perhaps some more Miyota builds, and let's get that clear case back in the right size so we can see that lovely rotor spinning. Until next time, have a great day.